Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal. Tonight, the shadows grow longer and the whispers of war echo through the streets of Paris. In a world torn by conflict, a symbol emerges, the Golden Triangle, holding the secrets of power, fortune, and death. And only one man, master of disguise and thief of legend, dares to follow its trail. This is not just a chase for treasure, it's a race against destiny. Chapter 11. On the Brink. Patrice at once made up his mind what to do. He lifted Coralie to her bed and asked her not to move or call out. Then he made sure that Yabon was not seriously wounded. Lastly, he rang violently, sounding all the bells that communicated with the posts which he had placed in different parts of the house. The men came hurrying up. "You're a pack of nincompoops," he said. "Someone's been here. Little Mother Coralie and Yabon have had a narrow escape from being killed." They began to protest loudly. "Silence," he commanded. "You deserve a good hiding, every one of you. I'll forgive you on one condition, which is that all this evening and all tonight you speak of Little Mother Coralie as though she were dead." "But whom are we to speak to, sir?" one of them objected. "There's nobody here." "Yes, there is, you silly fool, since Little Mother Coralie and Yabon have been attacked. Unless it was yourselves who did it." "It wasn't?" "Very well, then, and let me have no more nonsense. It's not a question of speaking to others, but of talking among yourselves, and of thinking, even without speaking. There are people listening to you, spying on you, people who hear what you say and who guess what you don't say. So, until tomorrow, Little Mother Coralie will not leave her room. You shall keep watch over her by turns. Those who are not watching will go to bed immediately after dinner. No moving about the house, do you understand? Absolute silence and quiet. And old Simeon, sir? Lock him up in his room. He's dangerous because he's mad. They may have taken advantage of his madness to make him open the door to them. Lock him up." Patrice's plan was a simple one. As the enemy, believing Coralie to be on the point of death, had revealed to her his intention, which was to kill Patrice as well, it was necessary that he should think himself free to act, with nobody to suspect his schemes or to be on his guard against him. He would enter upon the struggle and would then be caught in a trap. Pending this struggle, for which he longed with all his might, Patrice saw to Yabon's wound, which proved to be only slight, and questioned him and Coralie. Their answers tallied at all points. Coralie, feeling a little tired, was lying down reading. Yabon remained in the passage, outside the open door, squatting on the floor, Arab fashion. Neither of them heard anything suspicious, and suddenly Yabon saw a shadow between himself and the light in the passage. This light, which came from an electric lamp, was put out at just about the same time as the light in the bedroom. Yabon, already half erect, felt a violent blow in the back of the neck and lost consciousness. Coralie tried to escape by the door of her boudoir, was unable to open it, began to cry out, and was at once seized and thrown down. All this had happened within the space of a few seconds. The only hint that Patrice succeeded in obtaining was that the man came not from the staircase but from the servants' wing. This had a smaller staircase of its own, communicating with the kitchen through a pantry, by which the tradesmen entered from the Rue Renouard. The door leading to the street was locked, but someone might easily possess a key. After dinner, Patrice went in to see Coralie for a moment, and then, at 9 o'clock, retired to his bedroom, which was situated a little lower down on the same side. It had been used in Arsène Lupin's lifetime as a smoking room. As the attack from which he expected such good results was not likely to take place before the middle of the night, Patrice sat down at a roll-top desk standing against the wall and took out the diary in which he had begun his detailed record of recent events. He wrote on for half an hour or 40 minutes and was about to close the book when he seemed to hear a vague rustle, which he would certainly not have noticed if his nerves had not been stretched to their utmost state of tension, and he remembered the day when he and Coralie had once before been shot at. This time, however, the window was not open, nor even ajar. He therefore went on writing without turning his head or doing anything to suggest that his attention had been aroused, and he set down, almost unconsciously, the actual phases of his anxiety. He is here. He is watching me. I wonder what he means to do. I doubt if he will smash a pane of glass and fire a bullet at me. He has tried that method before, and found it uncertain and a failure. No, his plan is thought out, I expect, in a different and more intelligent fashion. He is more likely to wait for me to go to bed, when he can watch me sleeping and effect his entrance by some means which I can't guess. Meanwhile, it's extraordinarily exhilarating to know that his eyes are upon me. He hates me, and his hatred is coming nearer and nearer to mine, like one sword feeling its way towards another before clashing. He is watching me as a wild animal, lurking in the dark, watches its prey, and selects the spot on which to fasten its fangs. But no, I am certain that it's he who is the prey, doomed beforehand to defeat and destruction. He is preparing his knife, or his red silk cord. And it's these two hands of mine that will finish the battle. They are strong and powerful, and are already enjoying their victory. They will be victorious. Patrice shut down the desk, lit a cigarette, and smoked it quietly, as his habit was before going to bed. Then he undressed, folded his clothes carefully over the back of a chair, wound up his watch, got into bed and switched off the light. At last, he said to himself, I shall know the truth. I shall know who this man is. Some friend of Arsène's continuing his work? But why this hatred of Coralie? Is he in love with her, as he is trying to finish me off too? I shall know. I shall soon know. An hour passed, however, and another hour, during which nothing happened on the side of the window. A single creaking came from somewhere beside the desk. But this, no doubt, was one of those sounds of creaking furniture which we often hear in the silence of the night. Patrice began to lose the buoyant hope that had sustained him so far. He perceived that his elaborate sham regarding Coralie's death was a poor thing after all, and that a man of his enemy's stamp might well refuse to be taken in by it. Feeling rather put out, he was on the point of going to sleep, when he heard the same creaking sound at the same spot. The need to do something made him jump out of bed. He turned on the light. Everything seemed to be as he had left it. There was no trace of a strange presence. "Well," said Patrice, "one thing's certain. I'm no good. The enemy must have smelt a rat and guessed the trap I laid for him. Let's go to sleep. There will be nothing happening tonight." There was in fact no alarm. Next morning, on examining the window, he observed that a stone ledge ran above the ground floor all along the garden front of the house, wide enough for a man to walk upon by holding on to the balconies and rain-pipes. He inspected all the rooms to which the ledge gave access. None of them was old Simeon's room. "He hasn't stirred out, I suppose?" he asked the two soldiers posted on guard. "Don't think so, sir. In any case, we haven't unlocked the door." Patrice went in, and, paying no attention to the old fellow, who was still sucking at his cold pipe, he searched the room, having it at the back of his mind that the enemy might take refuge there. He found nobody. But what he did discover, in a press in the wall, was a number of things which he had not seen on the occasion of his investigations in Monsieur Masseron's company. These consisted of a rope ladder, a coil of lead pipes, apparently gas pipes, and a small soldering lamp. "This all seems devilish odd," he said to himself. "How did the things get in here? Did Simeon collect them without any definite object, mechanically? Or am I to assume that Simeon is merely an instrument of the enemy's? He used to know the enemy before he lost his reason, and he may be under his influence at present." Simeon was sitting at the window, with his back to the room. Patrice went up to him and gave a start. In his hands the old man held a funeral wreath made of black and white beads. It bore a date, the 14th of April, 1915, and made the 20th the one which Simeon was preparing to lay on the grave of his dead friends. "He will lay it there," said Patrice aloud. "His instinct as an avenging friend, which has guided his steps through life, continues in spite of his insanity. He will lay it on the grave. That's so, Simeon, isn't it? You will take it there tomorrow, for tomorrow is the 14th of April, the sacred anniversary." He leant over the incomprehensible being who held the key to all the plots and counterplots, to all the treachery and benevolence that constituted the inextricable drama. Simeon thought that Patrice wanted to take the wreath from him and pressed it to his chest with a startled gesture. "Don't be afraid," said Patrice. "You can keep it. Tomorrow, Simeon, tomorrow, Coralie and I will be faithful to the appointment which you gave us. And tomorrow perhaps the memory of the horrible past will unseal your brain." The day seemed long to Patrice, who was eager for something that would provide a glimmer in the surrounding darkness. And now this glimmer seemed about to be kindled by the arrival of this 20th anniversary of the 14th of April. At a late hour in the afternoon, Monsieur Mazarin called at the Rue Raynouard. "Look what I've just received," he said to Patrice. "It's rather curious, an anonymous letter in a disguised hand. Listen, sir, be warned. They're going away. Take care. Tomorrow evening, the 1,800 bags will be on their way out of the country. A friend of France. And tomorrow is the 14th of April, said Patrice, at once connecting the two trains of thought in his mind. Yes. What makes you say that? Nothing. Something that just occurred to me. He was nearly telling Monsieur Mazarin all the facts associated with the 14th of April, and all those concerning the strange personality of old Simeon. If he did not speak, it was for obscure reasons, perhaps because he wished to work out this part of the case alone, perhaps also because of a sort of shyness which prevented him from admitting Monsieur Mazarin into all the secrets of the past. He said nothing about it, therefore, and asked, "What do you think of the letter?" "Upon my word, I don't know what to think. It may be a warning with something to back it, or it may be a trick to make us adopt one course of conduct rather than another. I'll talk about it to Bourneuf." "Nothing fresh on his side?" "No, and I don't expect anything in particular. The alibi which he has submitted is genuine. His friends and he are so many supers. Their parts are played. The coincidence of dates was all that stuck in Patrice's mind. The two roads which Monsieur Mazarin and he were following suddenly met on this day so long since marked out by fate. The past and the present were about to unite. The catastrophe was at hand. The 14th of April was the day on which the gold was to disappear for good, and also the day on which an unknown voice had summoned Patrice and Coralie to the same tryst which his father and her mother had kept 20 years ago. And the next day was the 14th of April. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Patrice asked after old Simeon. "Gone out, sir. You had countermanded your orders." Patrice entered the room and looked for the wreath. It was not there. Moreover, the three things in the cupboard, the rope ladder, the coil of lead, and the glazier's lamp, were not there either. "Did Simeon take anything with him?" "Yes, sir. A wreath." "Nothing else?" "No, sir." The window was open. Patrice came to the conclusion that the things had gone by this way, thus confirming his theory that the old fellow was an unconscious confederate. Shortly before 10 o'clock, Coralie joined him in the garden. Patrice had told her the latest events. She looked pale and anxious. They went round the lawns and, without being seen, reached the clumps of dwarf shrubs which hid the door on the lane. Patrice opened the door. As he started to open the other, his hand hesitated. He felt sorry that he had not told Monsieur Mazarin, and that he and Coralie were performing by themselves a pilgrimage, which certain signs warned him to be dangerous. He shook off the obsession, however. He had 2 revolvers with him. What had he to fear? "You're coming in, aren't you, Coralie?" "Yes," she said. "I somehow thought you seemed undecided, anxious." "It's quite true," said Coralie. "I feel a sort of hollowness." "Why? Are you afraid?" "No. Or rather, yes. I'm not afraid for today, but in some way for the past. I think of my poor mother, who went through this door, as I am doing, one April morning. She was perfectly happy. She was going to meet her love. And then I feel as if I wanted to hold her back and cry, 'Don't go on. Death is lying in wait for you. Don't go on.' And it's I who hear those words of terror. They ring in my ears. It's I who hear them, and I dare not go on. I'm afraid." Let's go back, Coralie. She only took his arm. No, she said in a firm voice. We'll walk on. I want to pray. It will do me good. Boldly she stepped along the little slanting path which her mother had followed, and climbed the slope amid the tangled weeds and the straggling branches. They passed the lodge on their left and reached the leafy cloisters where each had a parent lying buried. And at once, at the first glance, they saw that the 20th wreath was there. "Simeon has come," said Patrice. An all-powerful instinct obliged him to come. He must be somewhere near. While Coralie knelt down beside the tombstone, he hunted around the cloisters and went as far as the middle of the garden. There was nothing left but to go to the lodge, and this was evidently a dread act which they put off performing, if not from fear, at least from the reverent awe which checks a man on entering a place of death and crime. It was Coralie once again who gave the signal for action. "Come," she said. Patrice did not know how they would make their way into the lodge, for all its doors and windows had appeared to them to be shut. But, as they approached, they saw that the back door opening on the yard was wide open, and they at once thought that Simeon was waiting for them inside. It was exactly 10 o'clock when they crossed the threshold of the lodge. A little hall led to a kitchen on one side and a bedroom on the other. The principal room must be that opposite. The door stood ajar. "That's where it must have happened, long ago," said Coralie in a frightened whisper. "Yes," said Patrice, "we shall find Simeon there. But if your courage fails you, Coralie, we had better give it up." An unquestioning force of will supported her. Nothing now would have induced her to stop. She walked on. Though large, the room gave an impression of coziness, owing to the way in which it was furnished. The sofas, armchairs, carpet, and hangings all tended to add to its comfort, and its appearance might well have remained unchanged since the tragic death of the two who used to occupy it. This appearance was rather that of a studio, because of a skylight which filled the middle of the high ceiling, where the belvedere was. The light came from here. There were 2 other windows, but these were hidden by curtains. "Simeon is not here," said Patrice. Coralie did not reply. She was examining the things around her with an emotion which was reflected in every feature. There were books, all of them going back to the last century. Some of them were signed Coralie, in pencil on their blue or yellow wrappers. There were pieces of unfinished needlework, an embroidery frame, a piece of tapestry with a needle hanging to it by a thread of wool, and there were also books signed Patrice, and a box of cigars and a blotting pad and an inkstand and pen holders. And there were 2 small framed photographs, those of 2 children, Patrice and Coralie. And thus the life of long ago went on, not only the life of 2 lovers who loved each other with a violent and fleeting passion, but of 2 beings who dwell together in the calm assurance of a long existence spent in common. "Oh, my darling, darling mother," Coralie whispered. Her emotion increased with each new memory. She leant trembling on Patrice's shoulder. "Let's go," he said. "Yes, dear, yes, we had better. We will come back again. We will come back to them. We will revive the life of love that was cut short by their death. Let us go for today. I have no strength left." But they had taken only a few steps when they stopped, dismayed. The door was closed. Their eyes met, filled with uneasiness. "We didn't close it, did we?" he asked. "No," she said, "we didn't close it." He went to open it and perceived that it had neither handle nor lock. It was a single door, of massive wood, that looked hard and substantial. It might well have been made of one piece, taken from the very heart of an oak. There was no paint or varnish on it. Here and there were scratches, as if someone had been rapping at it with a tool. And then on the right, were these few words in pencil: Patrice and Coralie, the 14th of April, 1895. God will avenge us. Below this was a cross, and below the cross, another date, but in a different and more recent handwriting. The 14th of April, 1915. "This is terrible, said Patrice. "Today's date! Who can have written that? It has only just been written. Oh, it's terrible! Come, come, after all, we can't. He rushed to one of the windows, tore back the curtain that veiled it, and pulled upon the casement. A cry escaped him. The window was walled up with building stones that filled the space between the glass and the shutters. He ran to the other window and found the same obstacle. There were 2 doors, leading probably to the bedroom on the right, and to a room next to the kitchen on the left. He opened them quickly. Both doors were walled up. He ran in every direction, during the first moment of terror, and then hurled himself against the first of the 3 doors and tried to break it down. It did not move. It might have been an immovable block. Then, once again, they looked at each other with eyes of fear, and the same terrible thought came over them both. The thing that had happened before was being repeated. The tragedy was being played a second time. After the mother and the father, it was the turn of the daughter and the son. Like the lovers of yesteryear, those of today were prisoners. The enemy held them in his powerful grip, and they would doubtless soon know how their parents had died by seeing how they themselves would die. The 14th of April, 1895. The 14th of April, 1915. Chapter 12. In the Abyss. "No, no, no," cried Patrice. "I won't stand this." He flung himself against the windows and doors, took up an iron dog from the fender and banged it against the wooden doors and the stone walls. Barren efforts! They were the same which his father had made before him, and they could only result in the same mockery of impotent scratches on the wood and the stone. "Oh, Coralie," he cried in his despair. "It's I who have brought you to this. What an abyss I've dragged you into. It was madness to try to fight this out by myself. I ought to have called in those who understand, who are accustomed to it. No, I was going to be so clever. Forgive me, Coralie." She had sunk into a chair. He, almost on his knees beside her, threw his arms around her, imploring her pardon. She smiled, to calm him. "Come, dear," she said gently. "Don't lose courage. Perhaps we are mistaken. After all, there's nothing to show that it is not all an accident." "The date," he said, "the date of this year, of this day, written in another hand. It was your mother and my father who wrote the first, but this one, Coralie, this one proves premeditation and an implacable determination to do away with us." She shuddered. Still she persisted in trying to comfort him. "It may be, but yet it is not so bad as all that. We have enemies, but we have friends also. They will look for us. They will look for us. But how can they ever find us, Coralie? We took steps to prevent them from guessing where we were going, and not one of them knows this house. Old Simeon does. Simeon came and placed his wreath, but someone else came with him, someone who rules him, and who has perhaps already got rid of him, now that Simeon has played his part." And what then, Patrice? He felt that she was overcome and began to be ashamed of his own weakness. "Well," he said, mastering himself, "we must just wait. After all, the attack may not materialize. The fact of our being locked in does not mean that we are lost, and, even so, we shall make a fight for it, shall we not? You need not think that I am at the end of my strength or my resources. Let us wait, Coralie, and act." The main thing was to find out whether there was any entrance to the house which could allow of an unforeseen attack. After an hour's search, they took up the carpet and found tiles which showed nothing unusual. There was certainly nothing except the door, and as they could not prevent this from being opened, since it opened outwards, they heaped up most of the furniture in front of it, thus forming a barricade which would protect them against a surprise. Then Patrice cocked his 2 revolvers and placed them beside him in full sight. "This will make us easy in our minds," he said. "Any enemy who appears is a dead man." But the memory of the past bore down upon them with all its awful weight. All their words and all their actions others before them had spoken and performed, under similar conditions, with the same thoughts and the same forebodings. Patrice's father must have prepared his weapons. Coralie's mother must have folded her hands and prayed. Together they had barricaded the door and together sounded the walls and taken up the carpet. What an anguish was this, doubled as it was by a like anguish. To dispel the horror of the idea, they turned the pages of the books, works of fiction and others, which their parents had read. On certain pages, at the end of a chapter or volume, were lines constituting notes which Patrice's father and Coralie's mother used to write each other. Darling Patrice, I ran in this morning to recreate our life of yesterday and to dream of our life this afternoon. As you will arrive before me, you will read these lines. You will read that I love you. And, in another book, my own Coralie, you have this minute gone. I shall not see you until tomorrow, and I do not want to leave this haven where our love has tasted such delights without once more telling you. They looked through most of the books in this way, finding, however, instead of the clues for which they hoped, nothing but expressions of love and affection. And they spent more than 2 hours waiting and dreading what might happen. "There will be nothing," said Patrice. "And perhaps that is the most awful part of it, for if nothing occurs, it will mean that we are doomed not to leave this room." "And in that case—" Patrice did not finish the sentence. Coralie understood, and together they received a vision of the death by starvation that seemed to threaten them. But Patrice exclaimed, "No, no, we have not that to fear, no. For people of our age to die of hunger takes several days, 3 or 4 days or more, and we shall be rescued before then." "How?" asked Coralie. "How?" "Why, by our soldiers, by Yabon, by Monsieur Masseron. They will be uneasy if we do not come home tonight. You yourself said, Patrice, that they cannot know where we are. They'll find out. It's quite simple. There is only the lane between the 2 gardens. Besides, everything we do is set down in my diary, which is in the desk in my room. Yabon knows of its existence. He is bound to speak of it to M. Masseron. And then there is Simeon. What will have become of him? Surely they will notice his movements, and won't he give a warning of some kind?" But words were powerless to comfort them. If they were not to die of hunger, then the enemy must have contrived another form of torture. Their inability to do anything kept them on the rack. Patrice began his investigations again. A curious accident turned them in a new direction. On opening one of the books through which they had not yet looked, a book published in 1895, Patrice saw 2 pages turned down together. He separated them and read a letter addressed to him by his father. "Patrice, my dear son, if ever chance places this note before your eyes, it will prove that I have met with a violent death which has prevented my destroying it. In that case, Patrice, look for the truth concerning my death on the wall of the studio, between the 2 windows. I shall perhaps have time to write it down." The 2 victims had therefore, at that time, foreseen the tragic fate in store for them, and Patrice's father and Coralie's mother knew the danger which they ran in coming to the lodge. It remained to be seen whether Patrice's father had been able to carry out his intention. Between the 2 windows, as all around the room, was a wainscoting of varnished wood, topped at a height of 6 feet by a cornice. Above the cornice was the plain plastered wall. Patrice and Coralie had already observed, without paying particular attention to it, that the wainscoting seemed to have been renewed in this part, because the varnish of the boards did not have the same uniform color. Using one of the iron dogs as a chisel, Patrice broke down the cornice and lifted the first board. It broke easily. Under this plank, on the plaster of the wall, were lines of writing. "It's the same method," he said, "as that which old Simeon has since employed. First write on the walls, then cover it up with wood or plaster." He broke off the top of the other boards, and in this way brought several complete lines into view, hurried lines, written in pencil and slightly worn by time. Patrice deciphered them with the greatest emotion. His father had written them at a moment when death was stalking at hand. A few hours later he had ceased to live. They were the evidence of his death agony, and perhaps, too, an imprecation against the enemy who was killing him and the woman he loved. Patrice read, in an undertone, I am writing this in order that the scoundrel's plot may not be achieved to the end, and in order to ensure his punishment. Coralie and I are no doubt going to perish, but at least we shall not die without revealing the cause of our death. A few days ago he said to Coralie, "You spurn my love. You load me with your hatred. So be it. But I shall kill you both, your lover and you, in such a manner that I can never be accused of the death, which will look like suicide. Everything is ready. Beware, Coralie." Everything was, in fact, ready. He did not know me, but he must have known that Coralie used to meet somebody here daily, and it was in this lodge that he prepared our tomb. What manner of death ours will be, we do not know. Lack of food, no doubt. It is 4 hours since we were imprisoned. The door closed upon us, a heavy door which he must have placed there last night. All the other openings, doors and windows alike, are stopped up with blocks of stone laid and cemented since our last meeting. Escape is impossible. What is to become of us? The uncovered portion stopped here. Patrice said, "You see, Coralie, they went through the same horrors as ourselves. They too dreaded starvation. They too passed through long hours of waiting when inaction is so painful, and it was more or less to distract their thoughts that they wrote those lines." He went on, after examining the spot. They counted, most likely on what happened, that the man who was killing them would not read this document. Look, one long curtain was hung over these 2 windows, and the wall between them, one curtain, as is proved by the single rod covering the whole distance. After our parents' death no one thought of drawing it, and the truth remained concealed until the day when Simeon discovered it, and, by way of precaution, hid it again under a wooden panel, and hung up 2 curtains in the place of one. In this way, everything seemed normal. Patrice set to work again. A few more lines made their appearance. "Oh, if I were the only one to suffer, the only one to die! But the horror of it all is that I am dragging my dear Coralie with me." She fainted and is lying down now, prostrate by the fears which she tries so hard to overcome. My poor darling, I seem already to see the pallor of death on her sweet face. Forgive me, dearest, forgive me. Patrice and Coralie exchanged glances. Here were the same sentiments which they themselves felt, the same scruples, the same delicacy, the same effacement of self in the presence of the other's grief. "He loved your mother," Patrice murmured, "as I love you. I also am not afraid of death. I have faced it too often with a smile. But you, Coralie, you, for whose sake I would undergo any sort of torture." Quote. He began to walk up and down, once more yielding to his anger. "I shall save you, Coralie, I swear it. And what a delight it will then be to take our revenge. He shall have the same fate which he was devising for us. Do you understand, Coralie? He shall die here in this room. Oh, how my hatred will spur me to bring that about." He tore down more pieces of boarding, in the hope of learning something that might be useful to him, since the struggle was being renewed under exactly similar conditions. But the sentences that followed, like those which Patrice had just uttered, were oaths of vengeance. "Coralie, he shall be punished, if not by us, then by the hand of God. No, his infernal scheme will not succeed. No, it will never be believed that we had recourse to suicide to relieve ourselves of an existence that was built up of happiness and joy. No, his crime will be known. Hour by hour I shall here set down the undeniable proofs." "Words, words!" cried Patrice, in a tone of exasperation. "Words of vengeance and sorrow, but never a fact to guide us. Father, will you tell us nothing to save your Coralie's daughter? If your Coralie succumbed, let mine escape the disaster. Thanks to your aid, Father. Help me, counsel me." But the father answered the son with nothing but more words of challenge and despair. "Who can rescue us? We are walled up in this tomb, buried alive and condemned to torture, without being able to defend ourselves. My revolver lies there, upon the table. What is the use of it? The enemy does not attack us. He has time on his side. Unrelenting time which kills of its own strength by the mere fact that it is time. Who can rescue us? Who will save my darling Coralie? The position was terrible, and they felt all its tragic horror. It seemed to them as though they were already dead, once they were enduring the same trial endured by others, and that they were still enduring it under the same conditions. There was nothing to enable them to escape any of the phases through which the other two, his father and her mother, had passed. The similarity between their own and their parents' fate was so striking that they seemed to be suffering two deaths, and the second agony was now commencing. Coralie gave way and began to cry. Moved by her tears, Patrice attacked the wainscoting with new fury, but its boards, strengthened by cross-laths, resisted his efforts. At last he read, "What is happening? We had an impression that someone was walking outside. In the garden. Yes, when we put our ears to the stone wall built in the embrasure of the window, we thought we heard footsteps. Is it possible? Oh, if it only were! It would mean the struggle, at last. Anything, rather than the maddening silence and endless uncertainty. That's it. That's it. The sound is becoming more distinct. It is a different sound, like that which you make when you dig the ground with a pickaxe. Someone is digging the ground, not in front of the house, but on the right, near the kitchen. Patrice redoubled his efforts. Coralie came and helped him. This time he felt that a corner of the veil was being lifted. The writing went on. Another hour, with alternate spells of sound and silence. The same sound of digging, and the same silence which suggests work that is being continued. And then someone entered the hall. One person. He, evidently. We recognized his step. He walks without attempting to deaden it. Then he went to the kitchen, where he worked the same way as before, with a pickaxe, but on the stones this time. We also heard the noise of a pane of glass breaking. And now he has gone outside again, and there is a new sort of sound, against the house, a sound that seems to travel up the house as though the wretch had to climb to a height in order to carry out his plan. Patrice stopped reading and looked at Coralie. Both of them were listening. "Hark," he said in a low voice. "Yes, yes," she answered. "I hear. Steps outside the house, in the garden." They went to one of the windows where they had left the casement open behind the wall of building stones and listened. There was really someone walking, and the knowledge that the enemy was approaching gave them the same sense of relief that their parents had experienced. Someone walked thrice round the house, but they did not, like their parents, recognize the sound of the footsteps. They were those of a stranger, or else steps that had changed their tread. Then, for a few minutes, they heard nothing more, and suddenly another sound arose, and though in their innermost selves they were expecting it, they were nevertheless stupefied at hearing it. And Patrice, in a hollow voice, laying stress upon each syllable, uttered the sentence which his father had written 20 years before. "It's the sound which you make when you dig the ground with a pickaxe." Yes, it must be that. Someone was digging the ground, not in front of the house, but on the right, near the kitchen. And so the abominable miracle of the revived tragedy was continuing. Here again the former act was repeated, a simple enough act in itself, but one which became sinister because it was one of those which had already been performed, and because it was announcing and preparing the death once before announced and prepared. An hour passed, the work went on, paused and went on again. It was like the sound of a spade at work in a courtyard, when the gravedigger is in no hurry, and takes a rest, and then resumes his work. Patrice and Coralie stood listening side by side, their eyes in each other's eyes, their hands in each other's hands. "He's stopping," whispered Patrice. "Yes," said Coralie, "only I think—" "Yes, Coralie, there's someone in the hall. Oh, we need not trouble to listen. We have only to remember. There, He goes to the kitchen and digs as he did just now, but on the stones this time. And then, oh, Coralie, the same sound of broken glass. It was memories mingling with the gruesome reality. The present and the past formed but one. They foresaw events at the very instant when these took place. The enemy went outside again, and forthwith the sound seemed to travel up the house as though the wretch had to climb to a height in order to carry out his plans. And then what would happen next? They no longer thought of consulting the inscription on the wall, or perhaps they did not dare. Their attention was concentrated on the invisible and sometimes imperceptible deeds that were being accomplished against them outside, an uninterrupted stealthy effort, a mysterious 20-year-old plan whereof each slightest detail was settled as by clockwork. The enemy entered the house, and they heard a rustling at the bottom of the door, a rustling of soft things apparently being heaped or pushed against the wood. Next came other vague noises in the two adjoining rooms, against the walled doors, and similar noises outside, between the stones of the windows and the open shutters. And then they heard someone on the roof. They raised their eyes. This time they felt certain that the last act was at hand, or at least one of the scenes of the last act. The roof to them was the framed skylight which occupied the center of the ceiling and admitted the only daylight that entered the room. And still the same agonizing question rose to their minds. What was going to happen? Would the enemy show his face outside the skylight and reveal himself at last? This work on the roof continued for a considerable time. Footsteps shook the zinc sheets that covered it, moving between the right-hand side of the house and the edge of the skylight. And suddenly this skylight, or rather a part of it, a square containing 4 panes, was lifted, a very little way, by a hand which inserted a stick to keep it open. And the enemy again walked across the roof and went down the side of the house. They were almost disappointed and felt such a craving to know the truth that Patrice once more fell to breaking the boards of the wainscoting, removing the last pieces, which covered the end of the inscription. And what they read made them live the last few minutes all over again. The enemy's return, the rustle against the walls and the walled windows, the noise on the roof, the opening of the skylight, the method of supporting it. All this had happened in the same order, and so to speak, within the same limit of time. Patrice's father and Coralie's mother had undergone the same impressions. Destiny seemed bent on following the same paths and making the same movements in seeking the same object. And the writing went on. He is going up again. He is going up again. There's his footsteps on the roof. He is near the skylight. Will he look through? Shall we see his hated face? He is going up again. He is going up again, gasped Coralie, nestling against Patrice. The enemy's footsteps were pounding over the zinc. Yes, said Patrice. He is going up as before, without departing from the procedure followed by the other. Only we do not know whose face will appear to us. Our parents knew their enemy. She shuddered at her image of the man who had killed her mother, and she asked, It was he, was it not? Yes, it was he. There is his name, written by my father. Patrice had almost entirely uncovered the inscription. Bending low, he pointed with his finger. Look, read the name, Arsène. You can see it down there. It was one of the last words my father wrote. And Coralie read. The skylight rose higher. A hand lifted it, and we saw, laughing as he looked down on us. Oh, the scoundrel. Arsène. And then he passed something through the opening, something that came down, that unrolled itself in the middle of the room, over our heads, a ladder, a rope ladder. We did not understand. It was swinging in front of us. And then, in the end, I saw a sheet of paper rolled round the bottom wrung and pinned to it. On the paper, in Arsene's handwriting, are the words, Send Coralie up by herself. Her life shall be saved. I give her 10 minutes to accept. If not... Ah, said Patrice, rising from his stooping posture. Will this also be repeated? What about the ladder, the rope ladder, which I found in old Simeon's cupboard? Coralie kept her eyes fixed on the skylight, for the footsteps were moving around it. Then they stopped. Patrice and Coralie had not a doubt that the moment had come, and that they also were about to see their enemy. And Patrice said huskily, in a choking voice, "Who will it be?" There are 3 men who could have played this sinister part, as it was played before. 2 are dead, Arsène and my father, and Simeon the 3rd is mad. Is it he, in his madness, who has set the machine working again? But how are we to imagine that he could have done it with such precision? No, it is the other one, the one who directs him, and who till now has remained in the background. He felt Coralie's fingers clutching his arm. "Hush," she said. "Here he is." No. Yes, I'm sure of it. Her imagination had foretold what was preparing, and in fact, as once before, the skylight was raised higher. A hand lifted it, and suddenly they saw a head slipping under the open framework. It was the head of old Simeon. "The madman," Patrice whispered in dismay. "The madman! But perhaps he isn't mad," she said. "He can't be mad." She could not check the trembling that shook her. The man overhead looked down upon them, hidden behind his spectacles, which allowed no expression of satisfied hatred or joy to show on his impassive features. "Coralie," said Patrice in a low voice, "do what I say. Come." He pushed her gently along, as though he were supporting her and leading her to a chair. In reality, he had but one thought: to reach the table on which he had placed his revolvers, take one of them, and fire. Simeon remained motionless, like some evil genius, come to unloose the tempest. Coralie could not rid herself of that glance which waited upon her. "No," she murmured, resisting Patrice, as though she feared that his intention would precipitate the dreaded catastrophe. "No, you mustn't." But Patrice, displaying greater determination, was near his object. One more effort, and his hand would hold the revolver. He quickly made up his mind, took rapid aim, and fired a shot. The head disappeared from sight. "Oh," said Coralie, "you are wrong, Patrice. He will take his revenge on us." "No, perhaps not," said Patrice, still holding his revolver. "I may very well have hit him. The bullet struck the frame of the skylight. But it may have glanced off, in which case—" They waited hand in hand, with a gleam of hope, which did not last long, however. The noise on the roof began again. And then, as before, and this they really had the impression of not seeing for the first time. As before, something passed through the opening. Something that came down, that unrolled itself in the middle of the room. A ladder, a rope ladder, the very one which Patrice had seen in old Simeon's cupboard. As before, they looked at it, and they knew so well that everything was being done over again, that the facts were inexorably, pitilessly linked together. They were so certain of it that their eyes at once sought the sheet of paper which must inevitably be pinned to the bottom rung. It was there, forming a little scroll, dry and discolored and torn at the edges. It was the sheet of 20 years ago, written by Arsène, and now serving, as before, to convey the same temptation and the same threat. Send Coralie up by herself. Her life shall be saved. I give her 10 minutes to accept. If not— Chapter 13. The Nails in the Coffin. If not— Patrice repeated the words mechanically, several times over, while their formidable significance became apparent to both him and Coralie. The words meant that if Coralie did not obey and did not deliver herself to the enemy, if she did not flee from prison to go with the man who held the keys of the prison, the alternative was death. At that moment neither of them was thinking what end was in store for them, nor even of that death itself. They thought only of the command to separate which the enemy had issued against them. One was to go, and the other to die. Coralie was promised her life if she would sacrifice Patrice. But what was the price of the promise? And what would be the form of the sacrifice demanded? There was a long silence, full of uncertainty and anguish between the two lovers. They were coming to grips with something, and the drama was no longer taking place absolutely outside them, without their playing any other part than that of helpless victims. It was being enacted within themselves, and they had the power to alter its ending. It was a terrible problem. It had already been set to the earlier Coralie, and she had solved it as a lover would, for she was dead, and now it was being set again. Patrice read the inscription, and the rapidly scrawled words became less distinct. I have begged and entreated Coralie. She flung herself on her knees before me. She wants to die with me. Patrice looked at Coralie. He had read the words in a very low voice, and she had not heard them. Then, in a burst of passion, he drew her eagerly to him and exclaimed, "You must go, Coralie. You can understand that my not saying so at once was not due to hesitation." "No, only I was thinking of that man's offer, and I am frightened for your sake. What he asks, Coralie, is terrible. His reason for promising to save your life is that he loves you, and so you understand. But still, Coralie, you must obey. You must go on living. Go. It is no use waiting for the 10 minutes to pass. He might change his mind and condemn you to death as well. No, Coralie, you must go. You must go at once." "I shall stay," she replied, simply. He gave a start. "But this is madness. Why make a useless sacrifice? Are you afraid of what might happen if you obeyed him?" "No." "Then go. I shall stay." "But why? Why this obstinacy?" "It can do no good." "Then why stay?" "Because I love you, Patrice." He stood dumbfounded. He knew that she loved him, and he had already told her so. But that she loved him to the extent of preferring to die in his company, this was an unexpected, exquisite, and at the same time terrible delight. "Ah," he said, "you love me, Coralie. You love me." "I love you, my own Patrice." She put her arms around his neck, and he felt that hers was an embrace too strong to be sundered. Nevertheless, he was resolved to save her, and he refused to yield. "If you love me," he said, "you must obey me and save your life. Believe me, it is 100 times more painful for me to die with you than to die alone. If I know that you are free and alive, death will be sweet to me." She did not listen and continued her confession, happy in making it, happy in uttering words which she had kept to herself so long. "I have loved you, Patrice, from the first day I saw you. I knew it without your telling me, and my only reason for not telling you earlier was that I was waiting for a solemn occasion, for a time when it would be a glory to tell you so, while I looked into the depths of your eyes and offered myself to you entirely. As I have had to speak on the brink of the grave, listen to me, and do not force upon me a separation which would be worse than death." "No, no," he said, striving to release himself. "It is your duty to go." He made another effort and caught hold of her hands. "It is your duty to go," he whispered, "and, when you are free, to do all that you can to save me." "What are you saying, Patrice?" "Yes," he repeated, "to save me. There is no reason why you should not escape from that scoundrel's clutches. Report him, seek assistance, warn our friends. You can call out, you can play some trick." She looked at him with so sad a smile and such a doubting expression that he stopped speaking. "You are trying to mislead me, my poor darling," she said, "but you are no more taken in by what you say than I am. No, Patrice, you well know that if I surrender myself to that man, he will reduce me to silence or imprison me in some hiding place, bound hand and foot, until you have drawn your last breath. You really think that? Just as you do, Patrice. Just as you are sure of what will happen afterwards." "Well, what will happen?" "Ah, Patrice, if that man saves my life, it will not be out of generosity. Don't you see what his plan is, his abominable plan, once I am his prisoner? And don't you also see what my only means of escape will be? Therefore, Patrice, if I am to die in a few hours, why not die now in your arms, at the same time as yourself, with my lips to yours? Is that dying? Is it not rather living, in one instant, the most wonderful of lives?" He resisted her embrace. He knew that the first kiss of her proffered lips would deprive him of all his power of will. "This is terrible," he muttered. "How can you expect me to accept your sacrifice, you so young, with years of happiness before you? Years of mourning and despair if you are gone. You must live, Coralie. I entreat you to, with all my soul." "I cannot live without you, Patrice. You are my only happiness. I have no reason for existence except to love you. You have taught me to love. I love you." Oh, those heavenly words! For the second time they rang between the four walls of that room. The same words, spoken by the daughter, which the mother had spoken with the same passion and the same glad acceptance of her fate. The same words made twice holy by the recollection of death past and the thought of death to come. Coralie uttered them without alarm. All her fears seemed to disappear in her love, and it was love alone that shook her voice and dimmed the brightness of her eyes. Patrice contemplated her with a rapt look. He, too, was beginning to think that minutes such as these were worth dying for. Nevertheless, he made a last effort. "And if I ordered you to go, Coralie?" "That is to say," she murmured, "if you ordered me to go to that man and surrender myself to him, is that what you wish, Patrice?" The thought was too much for him. Oh, the horror of it! That man! That man! You, my Coralie! So stainless and undefiled! Neither he nor she pictured the man in the exact image of Simeon. To both of them, notwithstanding the hideous vision perceived above, the enemy retained a mysterious character. It was perhaps Simeon. It was perhaps another, of whom Simeon was but the instrument. Assuredly it was the enemy, the evil genius crouching above their heads, preparing their death throes while he pursued Coralie with his foul desire. Patrice asked one more question. "Did you ever notice that Simeon sought your company?" "No, never. If anything, he rather avoided me." "Then it's because he's mad." "I don't think he is mad. He is revenging himself." "Impossible. He was my father's friend. All his life long he worked to bring us together. Surely he would not kill us deliberately." "I don't know, Patrice. I don't understand." They discussed it no further. It was of no importance whether their death was caused by this one or that one. It was death itself that they had to fight, without troubling who had set it loose against them. And what could they do to ward it off? "You agree, do you not?" asked Coralie in a low voice. He made no answer. "I shall not go," she went on, "but I want you to be of one mind with me. I entreat you. It tortures me to think that you are suffering more than I do. You must let me bear my share. Tell me that you agree." "Yes," he said, "I agree. My own Patrice, now give me your two hands, look right into my eyes and smile." Mad with love and longing, they plunged themselves for an instant into a sort of ecstasy. Then she asked, "What is it, Patrice? You seem distraught again." He gave a hoarse cry. "Look! Look!" This time he was certain of what he had seen. The ladder was going up. The 10 minutes were over. He rushed forward and caught hold of one of the rungs. The ladder no longer moved. He did not know exactly what he intended to do. The ladder afforded Coralie's only chance of safety. Could he abandon that hope and resign himself to the inevitable? 1 or 2 minutes passed. The ladder must have been hooked fast again, for Patrice felt a firm resistance up above. Coralie was entreating him. "Patrice," she asked. "Patrice, what are you hoping for?" He looked around and above him, as though seeking an idea, and he seemed also to look inside himself, as though he were seeking that idea amid all the memories which he had accumulated at the moment when his father also held the ladder, in a last effort of will. And suddenly, throwing up his leg, he placed his left foot on the 5th rung of the ladder and began to raise himself by the uprights. It was an absurd attempt to scale the ladder, to reach the skylight, to lay hold of the enemy, and thus save himself and Coralie. If his father had failed before him, how could he hope to succeed? It was all over in less than 3 seconds. The ladder was at once unfastened from the hook that kept it hanging from the skylight, and Patrice and the ladder came to the ground together. At the same time, a strident laugh rang out above, followed the next moment by the sound of the skylight closing. Patrice picked himself up in a fury, hurled insults at the enemy, and, as his rage increased, fired 2 revolver shots, which broke 2 of the panes. He next attacked the doors and windows, banging at them with the iron dog which he had taken from the fender. He hit the walls, he hit the floor, he shook his fist at the invisible enemy who was mocking him. But suddenly, after a few blows struck at space, he was compelled to stop. Something like a thick veil had glided overhead. They were in the dark. He understood what had happened. The enemy had lowered a shutter upon the skylight, covering it entirely. "Patrice! Patrice!" cried Coralie, maddened by the blotting out of the light and losing all her strength of mind. "Patrice! Where are you, Patrice? Oh, I'm frightened! Where are you?" They began to grope for each other like blind people, and nothing that had gone before seemed to them more horrible than to be lost in this pitiless blackness. "Patrice! Oh, Patrice! Where are you?" Their hands touched, Coralie's poor little frozen fingers and Patrice's hands that burned with fever, and they pressed each other and twined together and clutched each other, as though to assure themselves that they were still living. "Oh, don't leave me, Patrice," Coralie implored. "I am here," he replied. "Have no fear. They can't separate us." "You are right," she panted. "They can't separate us. We are in our grave." The word was so terrible, and Coralie uttered it so mournfully that a reaction overtook Patrice. "No! What are you talking about?" he exclaimed. "We must not despair. There is hope of safety until the last moment." Releasing one of his hands, he took aim with his revolver. A few faint rays trickled through the chinks around the skylight. He fired 3 times. They heard the crack of the woodwork and the chuckle of the enemy, but the shutter must have been lined with metal, for no split appeared. Besides, the chinks were forthwith stopped up, and they became aware that the enemy was engaged in the same work that he had performed around the doors and windows. It was obviously very thorough, and took a long time in the doing. Next came another work, completing the first. The enemy was nailing the shutter to the frame of the skylight. It was an awful sound. Swift and light as were the taps of the hammer, they seemed to drive deep into the brain of those who heard them. It was their coffin that was being nailed down, their great coffin with a lid hermetically sealed that now bore heavy upon them. There was no hope left, not a possible chance of escape. Each tap of the hammer strengthened their dark prison, making yet more impregnable the walls that stood between them and the outer world, and bade defiance to the most resolute assault. "Patrice," stammered Coralie, "I'm frightened. That tapping hurts me so." She sank back in his arms. Patrice felt tears coursing down her cheeks. Meanwhile, the work overhead was being completed. They underwent the terrible experience which condemned men must feel on the morning of their last day, when from their cells they hear the preparations, the engine of death that is being set up, or the electric batteries that are being tested. They hear men striving to have everything ready so that not one propitious chance may remain, and so that destiny may be fulfilled. Death had entered the enemy's service and was working hand in hand with him. He was death itself, acting, contriving, and fighting against those whom he had resolved to destroy. "Don't leave me," sobbed Coralie. "Don't leave me." "Only for a second or two," he said. "We must be avenged later." "What is the use, Patrice? What can it matter to us?" He had a box containing a few matches. Lighting them one after the other, he led Coralie to the panel with the inscription. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I will not have our death put down to suicide. I want to do what our parents did before us, and to prepare for the future. Someone will read what I am going to write, and will avenge us." He took a pencil from his pocket and bent down. There was a free space, right at the bottom of the panel. He wrote, "Patrice Belval and Coralie, his betrothed, die the same death, murdered by Simeon Diadochus the 14th of April, 1915. But, as he finished writing, he noticed a few words of the former inscription which he had not yet read, because they were placed outside it, so to speak, and did not appear to form part of it. "One more match," he said. "Did you see? There are some words there, the last, no doubt, that my father wrote." She struck a match. By the flickering light, they made out a certain number of misshapen letters, obviously written in a hurry and forming two words. Asphyxiated. Oxide. The match went out. They rose in silence. Asphyxiated, they understood. That was how their parents had perished, and how they themselves would perish. But they did not yet fully realize how the thing would happen. The lack of air would never be great enough to suffocate them in this large room, which contained enough to last them for many days. "Unless," muttered Patrice, "unless the quality of the air can be impaired, and therefore—" He stopped. Then he went on. "Yes, that's it. I remember." He told Coralie what he suspected, or rather what conformed so well with the reality as to leave no room for doubt. He had seen in old Simeon's cupboard not only the rope ladder which the madman had brought with him, but also a coil of lead pipes. And now Simeon's behavior, from the moment when they were locked in, his movements to and fro around the lodge, the care with which he had stopped up every crevice, his labors along the wall and on the roof, all this was explained in the most definite fashion. Old Simeon had simply fitted to a gas meter, probably in the kitchen, the pipe which he had next laid along the wall and on the roof. This, therefore, was the way in which they were about to die, as their parents had died before them, stifled by ordinary gas. Panic-stricken, they began to run aimlessly about the room, holding hands, while their disordered brains, bereft of thought or will, seemed like tiny things shaken by the fiercest gale. Coralie uttered incoherent words. Patrice, while imploring her to keep calm, was himself carried away by the storm, and powerless to resist the terrible agony of the darkness wherein death lay waiting. At such times a man tries to flee, to escape the icy breath that is already chilling his marrow. He must flee, but where? Which way? The walls are insurmountable, and the darkness is even harder than the walls. They stopped, exhausted. A low hiss was heard somewhere in the room, the faint hiss that issues from a badly closed gas jet. They listened and perceived that it came from above. The torture was beginning. "It will last half an hour, or an hour at most," Patrice whispered. Coralie had recovered her self-consciousness. "We shall be brave," she said. "Oh, if I were alone! But you, my poor Coralie!" "It is painless," she murmured. "You are bound to suffer, you, so weak. One suffers less the weaker one is. Besides, I know that we shan't to suffer, Patrice." She suddenly appeared so placid that he on his side was filled with a great peace. Seated on a sofa, their fingers still entwined, they silently steeped themselves in the mighty calm which comes when we think that events have run their course. This calm is resignation, submission to superior forces. Natures such as theirs cease to rebel when destiny has manifested its orders, and when nothing remains but acquiescence and prayer. She put her arm round Patrice's neck. "I am your bride in the eyes of God," she said. "May he receive us as he would receive a husband and wife." Her gentle resignation brought tears to his eyes. She dried them with her kisses, and, of her own seeking, offered him her lips. They sat wrapped in an infinite silence. They perceived the first smell of gas descending around them, but they felt no fear. "Everything will happen as it did before, Coralie," whispered Patrice. "Down to the very last second. Your mother and my father, who loved each other as we do, also died in each other's arms, with their lips joined together. They had decided to unite us, and they have united us. Our grave will be near theirs, she murmured. Little by little their ideas became confused, and they began to think much as a man sees through a rising mist. They had had nothing to eat, and hunger now added its discomfort to the vertigo in which their minds were imperceptibly sinking. As it increased, their uneasiness and anxiety left them, to be followed by a sense of ecstasy, then lassitude, extinction, repose. The dread of the coming annihilation faded out of their thoughts. Coralie, the first to be affected, began to utter delirious words which astonished Patrice at first. "Dearest, there are flowers falling, roses all around us. How delightful!" Presently he himself grew conscious of the same blissful exaltation, expressing itself in tenderness and joyful emotion. With no sort of dismay he felt her gradually yielding in his arms and abandoning herself, and he had the impression that he was following her down a measureless abyss, all bathed with light, where they floated, he and she, descending slowly and without effort towards a happy valley. Minutes or perhaps hours passed. They were still descending, he supporting her by the waist, she with her head thrown back a little way, her eyes closed and a smile upon her lips. He remembered pictures showing gods thus gliding through the blue of heaven, and, drunk with pure, radiant light and air, he continued to circle above the happy valley. But, as he approached it, he felt himself grow weary. Coralie weighed heavily on his bent arm. The descent increased in speed. The waves of light turned to darkness. A thick cloud came, followed by others that formed a whirl of gloom. And suddenly, worn out, his forehead bathed in sweat, and his body shaking with fever, he pitched forward into a great black pit. Chapter 14. A Strange Character. It was not yet exactly death. In his present condition of agony, what lingered of Patrice's consciousness mingled, as in a nightmare, the life which he knew with the imaginary world in which he now found himself, the world which was that of death. In this world, Coralie no longer existed, and her loss distracted him with grief. But he seemed to hear and see somebody whose presence was revealed by a shadow passing before his closed eyelids. This somebody he pictured to himself, though without reason, under the aspect of Simeon, who came to verify the death of his victims, began by carrying Coralie away, then came back to Patrice and carried him away also and laid him down somewhere. And all this was so well defined that Patrice wondered whether he had not woke up. Next hours passed, or seconds. In the end, Patrice had a feeling that he was falling asleep, but as a man sleeps in hell, suffering the moral and physical tortures of the damned. He was back at the bottom of the black pit, which he was making desperate efforts to leave, like a man who has fallen into the sea and is trying to reach the surface. In this way, with the greatest difficulty, he passed through one waste of water after another, the weight of which stifled him. He had to scale them, gripping with his hands and feet to things that slipped, to rope ladders which, possessing no points of support, gave way beneath him. Meanwhile, the darkness became less intense. A little muffled daylight mingled with it. Patrice felt less greatly oppressed. He half opened his eyes, drew a breath or two, and, looking round, beheld a sight that surprised him, the embrasure of an open door, near which he was lying in the air on a sofa. Beside him he saw Coralie on another sofa. She moved restlessly and seemed to be in great discomfort. "She is climbing out of the black pit," he thought to himself. "Like me, she is struggling. My poor Coralie." There was a small table between them, with 2 glasses of water on it. Parched with thirst, he took one of them in his hand, but he dared not drink. At that moment someone came through the open door, which Patrice perceived to be the door of the lodge, and he observed that it was not old Simeon, as he had thought, but a stranger whom he had never seen before. "I am not asleep," he said to himself. "I am sure that I am not asleep, and that this stranger is a friend." And he tried to say it aloud, to make certainty doubly sure, but he had not the strength. The stranger, however, came up to him and, in a gentle voice, said, "Don't tire yourself, Captain. You're all right now. Allow me. Have some water." The stranger handed him one of the two glasses. Patrice emptied it at a draught, without any feeling of distrust, and was glad to see Coralie also drinking. "Yes, I'm all right now," he said. "Heavens, how good it is to be alive! Coralie is really alive, isn't she?" He did not hear the answer and dropped into a welcome sleep. When he woke up, the crisis was over, though he still felt a buzzing in his head and a difficulty in drawing a deep breath. He stood up, however, and realized that all these sensations were not fanciful, that he was really outside the door of the lodge, and that Coralie had drunk the glass of water and was peacefully sleeping. "How good it is to be alive," he repeated. He now felt a need for action, but dared not go into the lodge, notwithstanding the open door. He moved away from it, skirting the cloisters containing the graves, and then, with no exact object, for he did not yet grasp the reason of his own actions, did not understand what had happened to him, and was simply walking at random, he came back towards the lodge, on the other front, the one overlooking the garden. Suddenly he stopped. A few yards from the house, at the foot of a tree standing beside the slanting path, a man lay back in a wicker long chair, with his face in the shade and his legs in the sun. He was sleeping, with his head fallen forward and an open book upon his knees. Then and not till then did Patrice clearly understand that he and Coralie had escaped being killed, that they were both really alive, and that they owed their safety to this man whose sleep suggested a state of absolute security and satisfied conscience. Patrice studied the stranger's appearance. He was slim of figure, but broad-shouldered, with a sallow complexion, a slight mustache on his lips and hair beginning to turn gray at the temples. His age was probably 50 at most. The cut of his clothes pointed to dandyism. Patrice leant forward and read the title of the book, The Memoirs of Benjamin Franklin. He also read the initials inside a hat lying on the grass. L.P. "It was he who saved me," said Patrice to himself. "I recognize him. He carried us both out of the studio and looked after us. But how was the miracle brought about? Who sent him?" He tapped him on the shoulder. The man was on his feet at once. His face lit up with a smile. "Pardon me, Captain, but my life is so much taken up that, when I have a few minutes to myself, I use them for sleeping, wherever I may be. Like Napoleon, eh? Well, I don't object to the comparison. But enough about myself. How are you feeling now? And Madame, little Mother Coralie, is she better? I saw no use in waking you, after I had opened the doors and taken you outside. I had done what was necessary, and felt quite easy. You were both breathing, so I left the rest to the good pure air." He broke off at the sight of Patrice's disconcerted attitude, and his smile made way for a merry laugh. "Oh, I was forgetting, you don't know me. Of course, it's true, the letter I sent you was intercepted. Let me introduce myself. Don Luis Perena, a member of an old Spanish family, genuine patent of nobility, papers all in order. But I can see that all this tells you nothing," he went on, laughing still more gaily. "No doubt Yabon described me differently when he wrote my name on that street wall one evening a fortnight ago. Aha, you're beginning to understand. Yes, I'm the man you sent for to help you. Shall I mention the name just bluntly? Well, here goes, Captain. Arsène Lupin, at your service." Patrice was stupefied. He had utterly forgotten Yabon's proposal and the unthinking permission which he had given him to call in the famous adventurer. And here was Arsène Lupin standing in front of him, Arsène Lupin, who, by a sheer effort of will that resembled an incredible miracle, had dragged him and Coralie out of their hermetically sealed coffin. He held out his hand and said, "Thank you." "Tut," said Don Luis playfully. "No thanks. Just a good handshake, that's all. And I'm a man you can shake hands with, Captain, believe me. I may have a few peccadillos on my conscience, but on the other hand I have committed a certain number of good actions which should win me the esteem of decent folk, beginning with my own." And so, he interrupted himself again, seemed to reflect, and, taking Patrice by a button of his jacket, said, Don't move. We are being watched. By whom? Someone on the quay, right at the end of the garden. The wall is not high. There's a grating on the top of it. They're looking through the bars and trying to see us. How do you know? You have your back turned to the quay, and then there are the trees. Listen. I don't hear anything out of the way. Yes, the sound of an engine. The engine of a stopping car. Now what would a car want to stop here for? On the quay, opposite a wall with no house near it. Then who do you think it is? Why, old Simeon, of course. Old Simeon? Certainly. He's looking to see whether I've really saved the two of you. Then he's not mad? Mad? No more mad than you or I. And yet, what you mean is that Simeon used to protect you. That his object was to bring you two together. That he sent you the key of the garden door. And so on and so on. Do you know all that? Well, of course. If not, how could I have rescued you? But, said Patrice anxiously, suppose the scoundrel returns to the attack. Ought we not to take some precautions? Let's go back to the lodge. Coralie is all alone. There's no danger. Why? Because I'm here. Patrice was more astounded than ever. Then Simeon knows you? He asked. He knows that you are here? Yes. Thanks to a letter which I wrote you under cover to Yabon and which he intercepted. I told you that I was coming, and he hurried to get to work. Only as my habit is on these occasions, I hastened on my arrival by a few hours so that I caught him in the act. At that moment you did not know he was the enemy. You knew nothing? Nothing at all. Was it this morning? No, this afternoon, at 1:45. Patrice took out his watch. And it's now 4, so in 2 hours. Not that. I've been here an hour. Did you find out from Yabon? Do you think I've no better use for my time? Yabon simply told me that you were not there, which was enough to astonish me. After that, I looked to see where you were. How? I first searched your room and, doing so in my own thorough fashion, ended by discovering that there was a crack at the back of your roll-top desk and that this crack faced a hole in the wall of the next room. I was able, therefore, to pull out the book in which you kept your diary and acquaint myself with what was going on. This, moreover, was how Simeon became aware of your least intentions. This was how he knew of your plan to come here on a pilgrimage on the 14th of April. This was how, last night, seeing you write, he preferred, before attacking you, to know what you were writing. Knowing it and learning, from your own words, that you were on your guard, he refrained. You see how simple it all is. If M. Masseron had grown uneasy at your absence, he would have been just as successful, only he would have been successful tomorrow. That is to say, too late. Yes, too late. This really isn't his business, however, nor that of the police, so I would rather that they didn't meddle with it. I asked your wounded soldiers to keep silent about anything that may strike them as queer. Therefore, if Monsieur Masseron comes today, he will think that everything is in order. Well, having satisfied my mind in this respect and possessing the necessary information from your diary, I took Yabon with me and walked across the lane and into the garden. Was the door open? No, but Simeon happened to be coming out at that moment. Bad luck for him, wasn't it? I took advantage of it boldly. I put my hand on the latch and we went in, without his daring to protest. He certainly knew who I was. But you didn't know at that time that he was the enemy? I didn't know? And what about your diary? I had no notion. But, Captain, every page is an indictment of the man. There's not an incident in which he did not take part, not a crime which he did not prepare. In that case, you should have collared him. And if I had, what good would it have done me? Should I have compelled him to speak? No, I shall hold him tightest by leaving him his liberty. That will give him rope, you know. You see, already he's prowling round the house, instead of clearing out. Besides, I had something better to do. I had first to rescue you two, if there was still time. Yabon and I therefore rushed to the door of the lodge. It was open, but the door of the studio, was locked and bolted. I drew the bolts, and to force the lock was, for me, child's play. Then the smell of gas was enough to tell me what had happened. Simeon must have fitted an old meter to some outside pipe, probably the one which supplied the lamps on the lane, and he was suffocating you. All that remained for us to do was to fetch the two of you out and give you the usual treatment, rubbing, artificial respiration, and so on. You were saved. I suppose he removed all his murderous appliances, asked Patrice. No. He evidently contemplated coming back and putting everything to rights, so that his share in the business could not be proved. So, too, that people might believe in your suicide, a mysterious suicide, death without apparent cause. In short, the same tragedy that happened with your father and little Mother Coralie's mother. Then you know? Why, haven't I eyes to read with? What about the inscription on the wall, your father's revelations? I know as much as you do, Captain, and perhaps a bit more. More? Well, of course. Habit, experience. Plenty of problems, unintelligible to others, seem to me the simplest and clearest that can be. Therefore, Don Luis hesitated whether to go on. No, he said. It's better that I shouldn't speak. The mystery will be dispelled gradually. Let us wait, for the moment. He again stopped, this time to listen. There. He must have seen you. And now that he knows what he wants to, he's going away. Patrice grew excited. He's going away! You really ought to have collared him. Shall we ever find him again, the scoundrel? Shall we ever be able to take our revenge? Don Luis smiled. There you go, calling him a scoundrel, the man who watched over you for 20 years, who brought you and little Mother Coralie together, who was your benefactor. Oh, I don't know. All this is so bewildering. I can't help hating him. The idea of his getting away maddens me. I should like to torture him, and yet... He yielded to a feeling of despair and took his head between his two hands. Don Luis comforted him. Have no fear, he said. He was never nearer his downfall than at the present moment. I hold him in my hand as I hold this leaf. But how? The man who's driving him belongs to me. What's that? What do you mean? I mean that I put one of my men on the driver's seat of a taxi, with instructions to hang about at the bottom of the lane, and that Simeon did not fail to take the taxi in question. That is to say, you suppose so, Patrice corrected him, feeling more and more astounded. I recognized the sound of the engine at the bottom of the garden when I told you. And are you sure of your man? Certain. What's the use? Simeon can drive far out of Paris, stab the man in the back. And then, when shall we get to know? Do you imagine that people can get out of Paris and go running about the highroads without a special permit? No. If Simeon leaves Paris, he will have to drive to some railway station or other, and we shall know of it 20 minutes after. And then we'll be off. How? By motor. Then you have a pass? Yes, valid for the whole of France. You don't mean it. I do, and a genuine pass at that, made out in the name of Don Luis Pereira, signed by the Minister of the Interior and countersigned. By whom? By the President of the Republic. Patrice felt his bewilderment change all at once into violent excitement. Hitherto, in the terrible adventure in which he was engaged, he had undergone the enemy's implacable will, and had known little besides defeat and the horrors of ever-threatening death. But now a more powerful will suddenly arose in his favor, and everything was abruptly altered. Fate seemed to be changing its course, like a ship which an unexpected fair wind brings back into harbor. "Upon my word, Captain," said Don Luis, "I thought you were going to cry like little Mother Coralie. Your nerves are overstrung, and I dare say you're hungry. We must find you something to eat. Come along." He led him slowly towards the lodge, and, speaking in a rather serious voice, "I must ask you," he said, "to be absolutely discreet in this whole matter, with the exception of a few old friends, and of Yabon, whom I met in Africa, where he saved my life. No one in France knows me by my real name. I call myself Don Luis Pereira. In Morocco, where I was soldiering, I had occasion to do a service to the very gracious sovereign of a neighboring neutral nation, who, though obliged to conceal his true feelings, is ardently on our side. He sent for me, and, in return, I asked him to give me my credentials and to obtain a pass for me. Officially, therefore, I am on a secret mission, which expires in 2 days. In 2 days I shall go back, to whence I came, to a place where, during the war, I am serving France in my fashion. Not a bad one, believe me, as people will see one day. They came to the settee on which Coralie lay sleeping. Don Luis laid his hand on Patrice's arm. "One word more, Captain. I swore to myself, and I gave my word of honor to him who trusted me that, while I was on this mission, my time should be devoted exclusively to defending the interests of my country to the best of my power. I must warn you, therefore, that, notwithstanding all my sympathy for you, I shall not be able to prolong my stay for a single minute after I have discovered the 1,800 bags of gold. They were the one and only reason why I came in answer to Yaban's appeal. When the bags of gold are in our possession, that is to say, tomorrow evening at latest, I shall go away. However, the two quests are joined. The clearing up of the one will mean the end of the other. And now enough of words. Introduce me to little Mother Coralie, and let's get to work. Make no mystery with her, Captain," he added, laughing. "Tell her my real name. I have nothing to fear. Arsène Lupin has every woman on his side." 40 minutes later, Coralie was back in her room, well cared for and well watched. Patrice had taken a substantial meal, while Don Luis walked up and down the terrace smoking cigarettes. "Finished, Captain. Then we'll make a start." He looked at his watch. 5:30. We have more than an hour of daylight left. That'll be enough. Enough? You surely don't pretend that you will achieve your aim in an hour? My definite aim, no. But the aim which I am setting myself at the moment, yes. And even earlier. An hour? What for? To do what? Why, you'll be a good deal wiser in a few minutes. Don Luis asked to be taken to the cellar under the library, where Arsène Bey used to keep the bags of gold until the time had come to send them off. Was it through this ventilator that the bags were let down? Yes. Is there no other outlet? None except the staircase leading to the library and the other ventilator. Opening on the terrace? Yes. Then that's clear. The bags used to come in by the first and go out by the second. But there's no but about it, Captain. How else would you have it happen? You see, the mistake people always make is to go looking for difficulties where there are none. They returned to the terrace. Don Luis took up his position near the ventilator and inspected the ground immediately around. It did not take long. 4 yards away, outside the windows of the library, was the basin with the statue of a child spouting a jet of water through a shell. Don Luis went up, examined the basin, and, leaning forwards, reached the little statue, which he turned upon its axis from right to left. At the same time, the pedestal described a quarter of a circle. "That's it," he said, drawing himself up again. "What?" "The basin will empty itself." He was right. The water sank very quickly, and the bottom of the fountain appeared. Don Luis stepped into it and squatted on his haunches. The inner wall was lined with a marble mosaic, composing a wide red and white fretwork pattern. In the middle of one of the frets was a ring, which Don Luis lifted and pulled. All that portion of the wall which formed the pattern yielded to his effort and came down, leaving an opening of about 12 inches by 10. "That's where the bags of gold went," said Don Luis. It was the second stage. They were dispatched in the same manner on a hook sliding along a wire. "Look, here is the wire, in this groove at the top." "By Jove!" cried Captain Belval. "But you've unraveled this in a masterly fashion. What about the wire? Can't we follow it?" "No, but it will serve our purpose if we know where it finishes. I say, Captain, Go to the end of the garden, by the wall, taking a line at right angles to the house. When you get there, cut off a branch of a tree, rather high up. Oh, I was forgetting. I shall have to go out by the lane. Have you the key of the door? Give it me, please." Patrice handed him the key, and then went down to the wall beside the key. "A little farther to the right," Don Luis instructed him. "A little more still. That's better. Now wait." He left the garden by the lane, reached the key, and called out from the other side of the wall. "Are you there, Captain?" "Yes." "Fix your branch so that I can see it from here." "Capital." Patrice now joined Don Luis, who was crossing the road. All the way down the Seine are wharves, built on the bank of the river and used for loading and unloading vessels. Barges put in alongside, discharge their cargoes, take in fresh ones, and often lie moored one next to the other. At the spot where Don Luis and Patrice descended by a flight of steps there was a series of yards, one of which, the one which they reached first, appeared to be abandoned, no doubt since the war. It contained, amid a quantity of useless materials, several heaps of bricks and building stones, a hut with broken windows, and the lower part of a steam crane. A placard swinging from a post bore the inscription, "Bertha Wharfinger and Builder." Don Luis walked along the foot of the embankment, 10 or 12 feet high, above which the quay was suspended like a terrace. Half of it was occupied by a heap of sand, and they saw in the wall the bars of an iron grating, the lower half of which was hidden by the sand heap shored up with planks. Don Luis cleared the grating and said jestingly, "Have you noticed that the doors are never locked in this adventure? Let's hope that it's the same with this one." His theory was confirmed, somewhat to his own surprise, and they entered one of those recesses where workmen put away their tools. "So far, nothing out of the common," said Don Luis, switching on an electric torch. "Buckets, pickaxes, wheelbarrows, a ladder." Just as I expected. Rails, a complete set of light rails. Lend me a hand, Captain. Let's clear out the back. Good, that's done it." Level with the ground and opposite the grating was a rectangular opening exactly similar to the one in the basin. The wire was visible above, with a number of hooks hanging from it. "So this is where the bags arrived," Don Luis explained. "They dropped, so to speak, into one of the 2 little trolleys which you see over there in the corner. The rails were laid across the bank, of course, at night, and the trolleys were pushed to a barge into which they tipped their contents. So that, quote, so that the French gold went this way. Anywhere you like. Somewhere abroad." "And you think that the last 1,800 bags have also been dispatched?" "I fear so." "Then we are too late?" Don Luis reflected for a while without answering. Patrice, though disappointed by a development which he had not foreseen, remained amazed at the extraordinary skill with which his companion, in so short a time, had succeeded in unraveling a portion of the tangled skein. "It's an absolute miracle," he said at last. "How on earth did you do it?" Without a word, Don Luis took from his pocket the book which Patrice had seen lying on his knees, the Memoirs of Benjamin Franklin, and motioned to him to read some lines which he indicated with his finger. They were written towards the end of the reign of Louis XVI and ran, "We go daily to the village of Passy adjoining my home, where you take the waters in a beautiful garden. Streams and waterfalls pour down on all sides, this way and that, in artfully leveled beds. I am known to like skillful mechanism, so I have been shown the basin where the waters of all the rivulets meet and mingle. There stands a little marble figure in the midst, and the weight of water is strong enough to turn it a quarter circle to the left, and then pour down straight to the Seine by a conduit, which opens in the ground of the basin." Patrice closed the book, and Don Luis went on to explain. "Things have changed since, no doubt, thanks to the energies of Essaries Bay. The water escapes some other way now, and the aqueduct was used to drain off the gold. Besides, the bed of the river has narrowed. Quays have been built, with a system of canals underneath them. You see, Captain, all this was easy enough to discover once I had the book to tell me." "Doctus cum libro." "Yes, but even so you had to read the book. A pure accident. I unearthed it in Simeon's room and put it in my pocket, because I was curious to know why he was reading it. Why? That's just how he must have discovered Arsène Lupin's secret, cried Patrice. He didn't know the secret. He found the book among his employer's papers and got up his facts that way. What do you think? Don't you agree? You seem not to share my opinion. Have you some other view? Don Luis did not reply. He stood looking at the river. Beside the wharves, at a slight distance from the yard, a barge lay moored, with apparently no one on her. But a slender thread of smoke now began to rise from a pipe that stood out above the deck. Let's go and have a look at her, he said. The barge was lettered, Lanchaalante, Bone. They had to cross the space between the barge and the wharf and to step over a number of ropes and empty barrels covering the flat portions of the deck. A companionway brought them to a sort of cabin, which did duty as a stateroom and a kitchen in one. Here they found a powerful-looking man, with broad shoulders, curly black hair, and a clean-shaven face. His only clothes were a blouse and a pair of dirty, patched canvas trousers. Don Luis offered him a 20-franc note. The man took it eagerly. Just tell me something, mate. Have you seen a barge lately, lying at Berthau's wharf? Yes, a motor barge. She left 2 days ago. What was her name? The Belle Hélène. The people on board, 2 men and a woman, were foreigners talking I don't know what lingo. We didn't speak to one another. But Berthau's wharf has stopped work, hasn't it? Yes, the owners joined the army. And the foreman as well. We've all got to, haven't we? I'm expecting to be called up myself, though I've got a weak heart. But if the yard stopped work, what was the boat doing here? I don't know. They worked the whole of one night, however. They had laid rails along the quay. I heard the trolleys, and they were loading up, what with, I don't know. And then, early in the morning, they unmoored. Where did they go? Downstream Mantes way. Thanks, mate. That's what I wanted to know. 10 minutes later, when they reached the house, Patrice and Don Luis found the driver of the cab which Simeon Diodocus had taken after meeting Don Luis. As Don Luis expected, Simeon had told the man to go to a railway station, the Gare Saint-Lazare, and there bought his ticket. Where to? To Mantes. Chapter 15. The Belle Hélène. There's no mistake about it, said Patrice. The information conveyed to Monsieur Masseron that the gold had been sent away, the speed with which the work was carried out at night mechanically by the people belonging to the boat, their alien nationality, the direction which they took, it all agrees. The probability is that between the cellar into which the gold was shot and the place where it finished its journey, there was some spot where it used to remain concealed, unless the 1,800 bags can have awaited their dispatch, slung one behind the other, along the wire. But that doesn't matter much. The great thing is to know that the Belle Hélène, hiding somewhere in the outskirts, lay waiting for the favorable opportunity. In the old days, Arsène Lupin, by way of precaution, used to send her a signal with the aid of that shower of sparks which I saw. This time, old Simeon, who is continuing Arsène's work, no doubt on his own account, gave the crew notice, and the bags of gold are on their way to Rouen and Le Havre, where some steamer will take them over and carry them eastwards. After all, 40 or 50 tons, hidden in the hold under a layer of coal, is nothing. What do you say? That's it, isn't it? I feel positive about it. Then we have Mantes, to which he took his ticket, and for which the Belle Hélène is bound. Could anything be clearer? Mantes, where he'll pick up his cargo of gold and go on board in some seafaring disguise, unknown and unseen. Loot and looter disappearing together. It's as clear as daylight. Don't you agree? Once again, Don Luis did not answer. However, he must have acquiesced in Patrice's theories, for, after a minute, he declared, "Very well, I'll go to Mantes." And, turning to the chauffeur, "Hurry off to the garage," he said, and come back in the 6th cylinder. I want to be at Mont in less than an hour. You, Captain, I shall come with you. And who will look after? Question mark, quote, Coralie, she's in no danger. Who can attack her now? Simeon has failed in his attempt, and is thinking only of saving his own skin and his bags of gold. You insist, do you? Absolutely. I don't know that you're wise. However, that's your affair. Let's go. By the way, though, one precaution. He raised his voice. Yeah, bon. The Senegalese came hastening up. While Yabon felt for Patrice all the affection of a faithful dog, he seemed to profess towards Don Luis something more nearly approaching religious devotion. The adventurer's slightest action roused him to ecstasy. He never stopped laughing in the great chief's presence. Yabon, are you all right now? Is your wound healed? You don't feel tired? Good. In that case, come with me. He led him to the quay a short distance away from Berthau's wharf. At 9 o'clock this evening, he said, you're to be on guard here, on this bench. Bring your food and drink with you, and keep a particular lookout for anything that happens over there, downstream. Perhaps nothing will happen at all, but never mind. You're not to move until I come back. Unless something does happen, in which case you will act accordingly. He paused, and then continued. Above all, Yabon, beware of Simeon. It was he who gave you that wound. If you catch sight of him, leap at his throat and bring him here. But mind you don't kill him. No nonsense now. I don't want you to hand me over a corpse, but a live man. Do you understand, Yabon? Patrice began to feel uneasy. Do you fear anything from that side? He asked. Look here, it's out of the question, as Simeon has gone. Captain, said Don Luis, when a good general goes in pursuit of the enemy, that does not prevent him from consolidating his hold on the conquered ground and leaving garrisons in the fortresses. Berthau's wharf is evidently one of our adversaries' rallying points. I'm keeping it under observation. Don Luis also took serious precautions with regard to Coralie. She was very much overstrained and needed rest and attention. They put her into the car and, after making a dash at full speed towards the center of Paris, so as to throw any spies off the scent, took her to the home on the Boulevard Maillot, where Patrice handed her over to the matron and recommended her to the doctor's care. The staff received strict orders to admit no strangers to see her. She was to answer no letter unless the letter was signed Captain Patrice. At 9 o'clock, the car sped down the Saint-Germain-en-Montes road. Sitting inside with Don Luis, Patrice felt all the enthusiasm of victory and indulged freely in theories, every one of which possessed for him the value of an unimpeachable certainty. A few doubts lingered in his mind, however, points which remained obscure, and on which he would have been glad to have Don Luis' opinion. There are two things, he said, which I simply cannot understand. In the first place, who was the man murdered by Arsène at 19 minutes past 7 in the morning, on the 4th of April? I heard his dying cries. Who was killed? And what became of the body? Don Luis was silent, and Patrice went on. The second point is stranger still. I mean Simeon's behavior. Here's a man who devotes his whole life to a single object, that of revenging his friend Belval's murder, and at the same time ensuring my happiness and Coralie's. This is his one aim in life, and nothing can make him swerve from his obsession. And then, on the day when his enemy, Arsène Bey, is put out of the way, suddenly he turns round completely and persecutes Coralie and me, going to the length of using against us the horrible contrivance which Arsène Bey had employed so successfully against our parents. You really must admit that it's an amazing change. Can it be the thought of the gold that has hypnotized him? Are his crimes to be explained by the huge treasure placed at his disposal on the day when he discovered the secret? Has a decent man transformed himself into a bandit to satisfy a sudden instinct? What do you think? Don Luis persisted in his silence. Patrice, who expected to see every riddle solved by the famous adventurer in a twinkling, felt peevish and surprised. He made a last attempt. And the golden triangle? Another mystery. For after all, there's not a trace of a triangle in anything we've seen. Where is this golden triangle? Have you any idea what it means? Don Luis allowed a moment to pass, and then said, Captain, I have the most thorough liking for you, and I take the liveliest interest in all that concerns you, but I confess that there is one problem which excludes all others, and one object towards which all my efforts are now directed. That is the pursuit of the gold of which we have been robbed. And I don't want this gold to escape us. I have succeeded on your side, but not yet on the other. You are both of you safe and sound, but I haven't the 1,800 bags, and I want them. I want them. You'll have them, since we know where they are. I shall have them, said Don Luis, when they lie spread before my eyes. Until then, I can tell you nothing. At Mount, the inquiries did not take long. They almost immediately had the satisfaction of learning that a traveler, whose description corresponded with old Simeon's, had gone to the Hôtel des Trois Empereurs, and was now asleep in a room on the 3rd floor. Don Luis took a ground-floor room, while Patrice, who would have attracted the enemy's attention more easily because of his lame leg, went to the Grand Hotel. He woke late the next morning. Don Luis rang him up and told him that Simeon, after calling at the post office, had gone down to the river and then to the station, where he met a fashionably dressed woman with her face hidden by a thick veil, and brought her back to the hotel. The two were lunching together in the room on the 3rd floor. At 4 o'clock, Don Luis rang up again to ask Patrice to join him at once in a little café at the end of the town facing the Seine. Here Patrice saw Simeon on the quay. He was walking with his hands behind his back, like a man strolling without any definite object. Comforter, spectacles, the same get-up as usual, said Patrice. Not a thing about him changed. Watch him. He's putting on an air of indifference, but you can bet that his eyes are looking upstream, in the direction from which the Belle Hélène is coming. Yes, yes, said Don Luis. Here's the lady. Oh, that's the one, is it? Said Patrice. I've met her 2 or 3 times already in the street. A dust cloak outlined her figure and shoulders, which were wide and rather well developed. A veil fell around the brim of her felt hat. She gave Simeon a telegram to read. Then they talked for a moment, seemed to be taking their bearings, passed by the café and stopped a little lower down. Here Simeon wrote a few words on a sheet of notepaper and handed it to his companion. She left him and went back into the town. Simeon resumed his walk by the riverside. You must stay here, Captain, said Don Luis. But the enemy doesn't seem to be on his guard, protested Patrice. He's not turning round. It's better to be prudent, Captain. What a pity that we can't have a look at what Simeon wrote down. I might go after the lady? No, Captain, without wishing to offend you, you're not quite cut out for it. I'm not sure that even I... And he walked away. Patrice waited. A few boats moved up or down the river. Mechanically, he glanced at their names. And suddenly, half an hour after Don Luis had left him, he heard the clearly marked rhythm, the pulsation of one of those powerful motors which, for a few years past, have been fitted to certain barges. At the bend of the river, a barge appeared. As she passed in front of him, he distinctly, and with no little excitement, read the name of the Belle Hélène. She was gliding along at a fair pace, to the accompaniment of a regular, throbbing beat. She was big and broad in the beam, heavy and pretty deep in the water, though she appeared to carry no cargo. Patrice saw 2 watermen on board, sitting and smoking carelessly. A dinghy floated behind at the end of a painter. The barge went on and passed out of sight at the turn. Patrice waited another hour before Don Luis came back. Well, he asked, have you seen her? Yes, they let go the dinghy 1.5 miles from here and put in for Simeon. Then he's gone with them? Yes. Without suspecting anything? You're asking me too much, Captain. Never mind, we've won. We shall catch them up in the car, pass them, and, at Vernon or somewhere, inform the military and civil authorities, so that they may proceed to arrest the men and seize the boat. We shall inform nobody, Captain. We shall proceed to carry out these little operations ourselves." "What do you mean? Surely—" The two looked at each other. Patrice had been unable to dissemble the thought that occurred to his mind. Don Luis showed no resentment. "You're afraid that I shall run away with the 300 millions? By jingo, it's a largish parcel to hide in one's jacket pocket." "Still," said Patrice, "may I ask what you intend to do?" "You may, Captain, but allow me to postpone my reply until we've really won. For the moment, we must first find the barge again." They went to the Hôtel des Trois Empereurs and drove off in the car towards Vernon. This time they were both silent. The road joined the river a few miles lower down, at the bottom of the steep hill which begins at Rosny. Just as they reached Rosny, the Belle Hélène was entering the long loop which curves out to La Roche-Guyon, turns back and joins the high road again at Bonnières. She would need at least 3 hours to cover the distance, whereas the car, climbing the hill and keeping straight ahead, arrived at Bonnières in 15 minutes. They drove through the village. There was an inn a little way beyond it, on the right. Don Luis made his chauffeur stop here. "If we are not back by 12 tonight," he said, "go home to Paris. Will you come with me, Captain?" Patrice followed him towards the right, whence a small road led them to the river bank. They followed this for a quarter of an hour. At last Don Luis found what he appeared to be seeking, a boat fastened to a stake, not far from a villa with closed shutters. Don Luis unhooked the chain. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. Night was falling fast, but a brilliant moonlight lit the landscape. "First of all," said Don Luis, "a word of explanation. We're going to wait for the barge. She'll come in sight on the stroke of 10 and find us lying across stream. I shall order her to heave to, and there's no doubt that, when they see your uniform by the light of the moon or of my electric lamp, they will obey. Then we shall go on board. Suppose they refuse? If they refuse, we shall board her by force. There are 3 of them and 2 of us. So... and then? And then? Well, there's every reason to believe that the 2 men forming the crew are only extra hands, employed by Simeon, but ignorant of his actions and knowing nothing of the nature of the cargo. Once we have reduced Simeon to helplessness and paid them handsomely, they'll take the barge wherever I tell them. But, mind you, and this is what I was coming to, I mean to do with the barge exactly as I please. I shall hand over the cargo as and when I think fit. It's my booty, my prize. No one is entitled to it but myself." The officer drew himself up. "Oh, I can't agree to that, you know." "Very well. Then give me your word of honor that you'll keep a secret which doesn't belong to you. After which, we'll say good night and go our own ways. I'll do the boarding alone, and you can go back to your own business. Observe, however, that I am not insisting on an immediate reply. You have plenty of time to reflect and to take the decision which your interest, honor, and conscience may dictate to you. For my part, excuse me, but you know my weakness. When circumstances give me a little spare time, I take advantage of it to go to sleep. Carpe somnum, as the poet says. Good night, Captain." And, without another word, Don Luis wrapped himself in his great coat, sprang into the boat, and lay down. Patrice had had to make a violent effort to restrain his anger. Don Luis, calm, ironic tone, and well-bred, bantering voice, got on his nerves all the more, because he felt the influence of that strange man, and fully recognized that he was incapable of acting without his assistance. Besides, he could not forget that Don Luis had saved his life and Coralie's. The hours slipped by. The adventurer slumbered peacefully in the cool night air. Patrice hesitated what to do, seeking for some plan of conduct which would enable him to get at Simeon and rid himself of that implacable adversary, and at the same time to prevent Don Luis from laying hands on the enormous treasure. He was dismayed at the thought of being his accomplice. And yet, when the first throbs of the motor were heard in the distance, and when Don Luis awoke, Patrice was by his side, ready for action. They did not exchange a word. A village clock struck 10. The Belle Hélène was coming towards them. Patrice felt his excitement increase. The Belle Hélène meant Simeon's capture, the recovery of the millions, Coralie out of danger, the end of that most hideous nightmare, and the total extinction of Arsène's handiwork. The engine was throbbing nearer and nearer. Its loud and regular beat sounded wide over the motionless Seine. Don Luis had taken the sculls and was pulling hard for the middle of the river, and suddenly they saw in the distance a black mass looming up in the white moonlight. 12 or 15 more minutes passed, and the Belle Hélène was before them. "Shall I lend you a hand?" whispered Patrice. "It looks as if you had the current against you, and as if you had a difficulty in getting along." "Not the least difficulty," said Don Luis, and he began to hum a tune. But Patrice was stupefied. The boat had turned in its own length, and was making for the bank. "But, I say," he said. "What's this? Are you going back? Are you giving up? I don't understand. You're surely not afraid because they're 3 to our 2? Don Luis leapt on shore at a bound and stretched out his hand to him. Patrice pushed it aside, growling, "Will you explain what it all means?" "Take too long," replied Don Luis. "Just one question, though. You know that book I found in old Simeon's room, the Memoirs of Benjamin Franklin? Did you see it when you were making your search? Look here. It seems to me we have other things to—" "It's an urgent question, Captain." "Well, no, it wasn't there." "Then that's it," said Don Luis. "We've been done brown. Or rather, to be accurate, I have. Let's be off, Captain, as fast as we can." Patrice was still in the boat. He pushed off abruptly and caught up the scull, muttering, "As I live, I believe the beggar's getting at me." He was 10 yards from shore when he cried, "If you're afraid, I'll go alone. Don't want any help." "Right you are, Captain," replied Don Luis. "I'll expect you presently at the inn." Patrice encountered no difficulties in his undertaking. At the first order, which he shouted in a tone of command, the Belle Hélène stopped, and he was able to board her peacefully. The 2 bargees were men of a certain age, natives of the Basque coast. He introduced himself as a representative of the military authorities, and they showed him over their craft. He found neither old Simeon nor the very smallest bag of gold. The hold was almost empty. The questions and answers did not take long. "Where are you going?" "To Rouen. We've been requisitioned by the government for transport of supplies." "But you picked up somebody on the way." "Yes, at Mantis." "His name, please." "Simeon Diodocus." "Where's he got to?" "He made us put him down a little after to take the train." "What did he want?" "To pay us." "For what?" "For a shipload we took at Paris 2 days ago." "Bags?" "Yes." "What of?" "Don't know. We were well paid and asked no questions." "And what's become of the load?" "We transshipped it last night to a small steamer that came alongside of us below Passy." "What's the steamer's name?" "The Chamois." "Crew of 6. "Where is she now?" "Ahead of us." "She was going fast. She must be at Rouen by this time." "Simeon Diodocus is on his way to join her." "How long have you known Simeon Diodocus?" "It's the first time we saw him. But we knew that he was in emissaries' service." "Oh, so you've worked for emissaries?" "Yes, often. Same job and same trip." "He called you by means of a signal, didn't he?" "Yes, he used to light an old factory chimney." "Was it always bags?" "Yes. We didn't know what was inside. He was a good payer." Patrice asked no more questions. He hurriedly got into his boat, pulled back to shore, and found Don Luis seated with a comfortable supper in front of him. "Quick," he said. "The cargo is on board a steamer, the Chamois. We can catch her up between Rouen and Le Havre." Don Luis rose and handed the officer a white paper packet. "Here's a few sandwiches for you, Captain," he said. "We've an arduous night before us. I'm very sorry that you didn't get asleep as I did. Let's be off, and this time I shall drive. We'll knock some pace out of her. Come and sit beside me, Captain." They both stepped into the car. The chauffeur took his seat behind them. But they had hardly started when Patrice exclaimed, "Hi! What are you up to? Not this way. We're going back to Mantes or Paris." "That's what I mean to do," said Louis with a chuckle. "Eh? What? Paris? Well, of course. Oh, look here, this is a bit too thick. Didn't I tell you that the two bargees, ? Those bargees of yours are humbugs. They declared that the cargo, no go, but the chamois, I tell you once more, we're done, Captain, done, Brown. Old Simeon is a wonderful old hand. He's a match worth meeting. He gives you a run for your money. He laid a trap in which I've been fairly caught. It's a magnificent joke, but there's moderation in all things. We've been fooled enough to last us the rest of our lives. Let's be serious now." "But aren't you satisfied yet, Captain? After the Belle Hélène, do you want to attack the chamois?" "As you please. You can get out at Mantes. Only, I warn you, Simeon is in Paris, with 3 or 4 hours start of us." Patrice gave a shudder. Simeon in Paris. In Paris, where Coralie was alone and unprotected. He made no further protest, and Don Luis ran on. Oh, the rascal! How well he played his hand. The memoirs of Benjamin Franklin were a master stroke. Knowing of my arrival, he said to himself, Arsène Lupin is a dangerous fellow, capable of disentangling the affair and putting both me and the bags of gold in his pocket. To get rid of him, there's only one thing to be done. I must act in such a way as to make him rush along the real track at so fast a rate of speed that he does not perceive the moment when the real track becomes a false track. That was clever of him, wasn't it? And so we have the Franklin book, held out as a bait. The page opening of itself, at the right place. My inevitable easy discovery of the conduit system. The clue of Ariadne most obligingly offered. I follow up the clue like a trusting child, led by Simeon's own hand, from the cellar down to Berthau's wharf. So far all's well. But, from that moment, take care. There's nobody at Berthau's wharf. On the other hand, there's a barge alongside, which means a chance of making inquiries, which means the certainty that I shall make inquiries. And I make inquiries. And, having made inquiries, I am done for. But then that man, ? Yes, an accomplice of Simeon's, whom Simeon, knowing that he would be followed to the Gare Saint-Lazare, instructs in this way to direct me to Mantes for the second time. At Mantes, the comedy continues. The Belle Hélène passes, with her double freight, Simeon, and the bags of gold. We go running after the Belle Hélène. Of course, on the Belle Hélène, there's nothing. No Simeon, no bags of gold. Run after the chamois. We've transshipped it all on the chamois. We run after the chamois, to Rouen, to Le Havre, to the end of the world. And of course, our pursuit is fruitless, for the chamois does not exist. But we are convinced that she does exist, and that she has escaped our search. And by this time, the trick is played. The millions are gone, Simeon has disappeared, and there is only one thing left for us to do, which is to resign ourselves and abandon our quest. You understand? We're to abandon our quest. That's the fellow's object. And he would have succeeded if... The car was traveling at full speed. From time to time, Don Luis would stop her dead with extraordinary skill. Post of territorials. Pass to be produced. Then a leap onward and once more the breakneck pace. If what? Asked Patrice, half convinced. Which was the clue that put you on the track? The presence of that woman at Mantes. It was a vague clue at first. But suddenly I remembered that, in the first barge, the nonchalant, the person who gave us information, do you recollect? Well, that this person somehow gave me the queer impression. I can't tell you why, that I might be talking to a woman in disguise. The impression occurred to me once more. I made a mental comparison with the woman at Mantes, and then it was like a flash of light. Don Luis paused to think and, in a lower voice, continued, "But who the devil can this woman be?" There was a brief silence, after which Patrice said, from instinct rather than reason, "Grégoire, I suppose." "Eh? What's that? Grégoire?" Yes, Grégoire is a woman." "What are you talking about?" "Well, obviously, don't you remember? The accomplice told me so, on the day when I had them arrested outside the café. Why, your diary doesn't say a word about it." "Oh, that's true. I forgot to put down that detail." "A detail? He calls it a detail. Why, it's of the greatest importance, Captain. If I had known, I should have guessed that that bargee was no other than Grégoire, and we should not have wasted a whole night. Hang it all, Captain, you really are the limit." But all this was unable to affect his good humor. While Patrice, overcome with presentiments, grew gloomier and gloomier, Don Luis began to sing victory in his turn. "Thank goodness! The battle is becoming serious. Really, it was too easy before, and that was why I was sulking. I, Lupin. Do you imagine things go like that in real life? Does everything fit in so accurately? Benjamin Franklin, the uninterrupted conduit for the gold, the series of clues that reveal themselves of their own accord, the man and the bags meeting at Mantes, the Belle Hélène. No, it all worried me. The cat was being choked with cream, and then the gold escaping in a barge. All very well in times of peace, but not in wartime, in the face of the regulations, passes, patrol boats, inspections, and I don't know what. How could a fellow like Simeon risk a trip of that kind? No, I had my suspicions, and that was why, Captain, I made Yabon mount guard, on the off chance, outside Berthau's wharf. It was just an idea that occurred to me. The whole of this adventure seemed to center round the wharf. Well, was I right or not? Is Monsieur Lupin no longer able to follow a scent? Captain, I repeat, I shall go back tomorrow evening. Besides, as I told you, I've got to. Whether I win or lose, I'm going. But we shall win. Everything will be cleared up. There will be no more mysteries, not even the mystery of the Golden Triangle. Oh, I don't say that I shall bring you a beautiful triangle of 18-karat gold. We mustn't allow ourselves to be fascinated by words. It may be a geometrical arrangement of the bags of gold, a triangular pile, or else a hole in the ground dug in that shape. No matter, we shall have it, and the bags of gold shall be ours, and Patrice and Coralie shall appear before Monsieur le Maire and receive my blessing and live happily ever after. They reached the gates of Paris. Patrice was becoming more and more anxious. Then you think the danger's over? Oh, I don't say that. The play isn't finished. After the great scene of the third act, which we will call the scene of the oxide of carbon, there will certainly be a fourth act, and perhaps a fifth. The enemy has not laid down his arms by any means. They were skirting the quays. "Let's get down," said Don Luis. He gave a faint whistle and repeated it 3 times. "No answer," he said. "Yabon's not there. The battle has begun." "But Coralie? What are you afraid of for her? Simeon doesn't know her address." There was nobody on Berthau's wharf, and nobody on the quay below. But by the light of the moon they saw the other barge, the Nonchalante. "Let's go on board," said Don Luis. "I wonder if the lady known as Grégoire makes a practice of living here. Has she come back, believing us on our way to Le Havre? I hope so. In any case, Yabon must have been there and no doubt left something behind to act as a signal. Will you come, Captain? Right you are. It's a queer thing, though. I feel frightened." "What of?" asked Don Luis, who was plucky enough himself to understand this presentiment. "Of what we shall see, my dear sir. There may be nothing there." Each of them switched on his pocket lamp and felt the handle of his revolver. They crossed the plank between the shore and the boat. A few steps downwards brought them to the cabin. The door was locked. "Hi, mate, open this, will you?" There was no reply. They now set about breaking it down, which was no easy matter, for it was massive, and quite unlike an ordinary cabin door. At last it gave way. "By jingo," said Don Luis, who was the first to go in. "I didn't expect this." "What?" "Look. The woman whom they called Gregoire. She seems to be dead." She was lying back on a little iron bedstead, with her man's blouse open at the top and her chest uncovered. Her face still bore an expression of extreme terror. The disordered appearance of the cabin suggested that a furious struggle had taken place. "I was right. Here, by her side, are the clothes she wore at Manse. But what's the matter, Captain?" Patrice had stifled a cry. "There, opposite, under the window." It was a little window overlooking the river. The panes were broken. "Well?" asked Don Luis. "What?" "Yes, I believe someone's been thrown out that way." "The veil. That blue veil," stammered Patrice, "is her nurse's veil. Coralie's." Don Luis grew vexed. "Nonsense. Impossible. Nobody knew her address." "Still." "Still what? You haven't written to her? You haven't telegraphed to her?" "Yes. I telegraphed to her from Mantes." "What's that?" "Oh, but look here, this is madness. You don't mean that you really telegraphed?" "Yes, I do." "You telegraphed from the post office at Mantes?" "Yes." "And was there anyone in the post office?" "Yes, a woman." "What woman? The one who lies here, murdered?" "Yes, but she didn't read what you wrote." "No, but I wrote the telegram twice over." "And you threw the first draft anywhere, on the floor, so that anyone who came along—" "Oh, really, Captain, you must confess!" ! But Patrice was running towards the car and was already out of earshot. Half an hour after, he returned with 2 telegrams which he had found on Coralie's table. The first, the one which he had sent, said, "All well. Be easy and stay indoors. Fondest love. Captain Patrice." The second, which had evidently been dispatched by Simeon, ran as follows: "Events taking serious turn. Plans changed. Coming back. Expect you 9 o'clock this evening at the small door of your garden. Captain Patrice." This second telegram was delivered to Coralie at 8 o'clock, and she had left the home immediately afterwards.